Did you search the home of someone named Sean Whiting on January 24th, 2015? Yes. And who participated in that search? All the individuals who I just named that were on the squad that day. Including Detective Taylor? Yes, sir. And who wrote the search warrant for that search? I did. Now, when you write a search warrant, are you responsible for what's seized at the location typically? Yes, sir. The whole case is pretty much your case. You're responsible for the majority of it. And what are you supposed to do with the property that's seized pursuant to a search warrant? It's supposed to be documented, and it's usually submitted to Evidence Control Unit. And what's the Evidence Control Unit? It's a unit that holds all the evidence for court purposes. Drugs, guns, money, everything like that. So is this a unit within the Baltimore Police Department? Yes, sir. Now, was anything found at the home of Sean Whiting when this search was conducted? Yes, sir. What was found? Drugs, guns, and money. And do you know how much money? No, I'm not. I'm not sure how much money. Okay, who found the money? Detective Taylor found the money. Did you see him find it? Yes. And where did he find it? It was in the master bedroom, in Mr. Whiting's room in the closet. And what happened? What did you see when Mr. Taylor found the money? He was digging into the closet, and once he found the money, he yelled, "I got it," out real loud, and which brought everyone in the room. And then once he came out from the closet, he was holding a bag. It was probably about that big. It was just full of money. It was a stack of money in the bag. And what did he do, or I guess, what happened to the money after he found it? We seized the money, but it was some task force officers that were there. Okay. And usually when you get a big seizure like that, they normally would take the money. But for our case prep, we wanted a picture of everything. So we took all the drugs and all the money back to the Western District, where we laid everything out and took a photograph of it for our case folder. Now, at the time that Detective Taylor took the money, did he say or do anything to you about what should happen to the money? He asked me to look out for him. And what did you understand look out for him to mean? I mean, we took some money to hold him down, gave him some money. So just to be clear, if some money was taken, well, I guess who decides if the money is going to be? Let me back up. When you say money was taken, how are you using that word? Are you talking about submitting it to BPD, or are you talking about stealing it? Talking about committing robbery. Yes, stealing it. All right. So when a search is conducted and there's money and it's stolen, in your experience, who decides how much everybody gets? If people that are involved when you're committing robberies and they're going to receive money, it's usually the person who's in charge of that case, because ultimately they're the ones who have to answer for it. So they will determine if the money is taken and how much money you should get. And again, who was in charge of this Sean Whiting case? I was. Was this the first time you had ever stolen money? No, sir. This was in 2014, right? Yes. Approximately when do you think you started doing it? Years before that. I'm not sure of the exact year. What? Were you on patrol, or was it once you had gone to the operational unit? Operations unit. Okay. And so you testified that Mr. Taylor asked you to look out for him. Was that the phrase? Yes, sir. And what did you understand that to mean? That meaning when I got some money, to give it to him. If I was to skim some money off the pile, give some to him. Okay, now you've testified that the money, and I think you said the drugs, right? Yes. Were brought back to a BPD office. Yeah, and it was guns also. And guns. Which BPD office were they brought back to? We had a sub-office in the Western District, so we were in the Western District on the second floor. We had a small office in there. And where in the Western District is that office? If you gotta go up the steps. It's right by like a gym, like a little, where the weights are at. It's a small office all the way in the back, close to the locker room, right by the gym. And where? I guess just to orient us, where is the Western District office in the city? In Baltimore City. Okay, and where? Like what neighborhood? Western District, like Gilmore Homes, Sandtown, Winchester. All right. And you testified that the money and guns and drugs were brought back so they could be photographed. Yes. All right. So walk the jury through what happened. I guess from the time that Detective Taylor found the money, walk us through where the money went, including once it got back to that office. Well, the money and everything went inside of a box. It was money, guns, and it was drugs. All went back into a box. We also had a kilo press, and it was a lot of items. So we actually had to get a power van, like a big van, to put all of the evidence in there. And we drove to the district. Once we got all that, we laid everything out to take a photograph for our case folder. And just if I could interrupt you, were you present for all of that? Yes, sir. Okay, so you said now you're back at the district and you're laying it out to photograph it. Where are you now? We're in the office in the Western District, in our sub-office. Okay, and who's in that office with you, with the money and the guns and the drugs? The whole squad was in the office. All the individuals I named except Detective Pulliam. He was the only one. He left earlier, so he wasn't there during the process of laying out all the evidence and taking photos of it. Okay, and then so it was Detective Taylor there with the money? Yes, Detective Taylor was present there too. All right, and then once the money was laid out, the guns, I guess, and the drugs were put out to be photographed, what did you do? Well, everything was laid out. It was photographed. And we had to take an inventory of it because Mr. Whiting was arrested. So I had to type up the probable cause, which is the arrest information. And everything that we recovered from the house had to be listed in the report. So it was a lot of items that were recovered. And they had to also submit all the stuff to Evidence Control Unit. So once everything was listed and photographed and all that stuff, I took the property listing sheet, which was everything that we recovered from the house, and I took it downstairs and started to process the arrest for Mr. Whiting. And so you said you took it downstairs. Where's the booking computer? It's on the first floor in the Western District. All right, so you went from the room where the money was being photographed down to the booking computer, is that right? Yes, sir. I think you said, to start typing up the statement of probable cause. Yes, because it was a lot of property was recovered, so. And did all of that have to go in the statement of probable cause? Yes. All right. And so at that moment, who was left upstairs when you left with the money and the other property? Everyone went to submit. It was me, Sergeant Ivory, and Taylor were the only ones left in the district. And you said everyone went to submit. You're in the Western District. Where do police officers in the Baltimore Police Department go to submit evidence? Where's the actual Evidence Control Unit that you've talked about located? It's at headquarters, which is downtown Baltimore City. All right, so you testified everybody else, all those names you mentioned, they had gone to bring, I guess, the guns and the drugs down to Evidence Control Unit? Yes, like I said, it was a lot of property that had to be submitted, so more than one person went down there. Okay. Why was the money not taken down to the Evidence Control Unit? Why was it left behind? As I was saying before, it was a task force officer there. I think his name was Galamaski. I think that was his name. And usually, when we get large seizures like that, they would usually take the money and submit it to their bank. And what kind of task force was that task force officer with? He was underneath HIDTA, he was a city officer, but he worked in the task force officer, and he was underneath HIDTA. And what's HIDTA? I'm not sure of the acronyms, but I guess they work with the feds. Okay, so just so I'm clear, when there's large amounts of money seized, are those monies turned over to HIDTA or other federal agencies? Yes. Because the process in Baltimore City is when we seize a lot of money, we have to take all that money, each bill we have to lay it out, and the serial number on any dollar bill has to be shown. So if you got $10, $20, $30,000, the table might be but so big, so it would take a long time to photograph all the money. Whereas though the task force officers can come, just take all the money, you put it in like a big Ziploc bag, they sign it, you sign it, They deposit it into a bank. The actual bank will count the money for you and get you an accurate count. Whereas, though it would take like 5 minutes, it would take us a couple of hours to do. Okay, so you said you didn't know how much money was taken, but this was enough money that you got HIDTA involved because they could process large amounts of money. Is that right? Looking at the amount, I believe it was probably over $10,000. Okay, so who was left in that room when you went to the booking computer with the money? It was Sergeant Ivory and Taylor. Okay, and when you came back, what did you notice about the amount of money? Before I could actually take some of the money, the pile was smaller, the money. So the pile of money had gotten smaller? Yes. And then what happened? That's when I took $1,500 off for me and $1,500 off for Taylor, and I gave him $1,500. Was anyone there when you took $3,000 from what was left? $1,500 for you and $15 for Taylor? No, I was the only one in the room. Okay, so when you came back up from the booking computer, were Ivory and Taylor gone? Yeah, the only thing, like our office, you have to have a key to get in there. So it's not like just anybody can walk in there. Someone who actually had a key to the office had to actually come in there, because once you close it, it locks. Was the door locked when you came back upstairs from the booking computer? Yes. And then you went in, and you testified that you thought the pile of money looked smaller? Yes. And then what did you do? I still took money from it, even though it was smaller. How much did you take? I took a total of $3,000, $1,500 for me and $1,500 for Taylor. And why? Why were you going to give half of the money to Taylor? He had asked me to look out for him. Back at the search scene? Yes. Then what did you do with where did you put the $3,000 that you stole? I believe I kept it on my persons, I believe. And what did you do with whatever money was now left over? That money, because the task force officer, Galimowski, he actually told me once I get finished taking the picture, I could bring the money back to him and he would still submit it for me. And where was he? He was located on the downtown in Baltimore City. I'm not sure what street it was. I believe it might be Calvert, right across from the courthouse. And is that where you went? Yes, I met him in the lobby. Do you remember if you met anyone else in the lobby with him? It was him, and I'm not sure if it was a supervisor or another task force officer. But there were 2 of them there. It was 2 of them. Okay, all right. And then where did you go? Where did you go after you actually submitted what was left of the money? After I gave it to the task force, I came back to the district and finished typing up my probable cause. Okay, and then what happened to the $3,000 that you had on your person that you had stolen from that money? Eventually, I had seen Taylor and met up with him and gave him his portion of the money. Do you remember where you met with him to give him his portion? If it wasn't in the office, it might have been down in the locker room, the basement floor in the Western District. Was it that day or was it another day? Same day. And what, if anything, did Taylor say to you when you gave him the money? He actually apologized because he was upset because when he found the money, he blurted out and alerted everybody else and they came in and they observed the money. He felt as though if he wouldn't have said nothing, we could have took all the money. All right. Next, I want to ask you about the search warrant at the home of someone named Vincent Lash. Did you participate in a search warrant at the home of Vincent Lash? No, I don't think that Vince. The search warrant I think you're talking about he was the affiant. I see. He was the officer who wrote the warrant. Okay. And what squad were you with when you participated in this search warrant that Vincent Lash was the affiant on? The same squad, SES, underneath Sergeant Ivory. All right. And where was the house located that you all searched? It was in Baltimore City at Edmondson and Fremont. Okay, so Edmondson Avenue and Fremont Avenue? Yes, the intersection. It was like the corner house there, the intersection. And what happened? Well, who participated in that search? Pretty much all the same detectives I named before. That was our squad, so we always went together. Anytime we were assigned to do a search warrant, that was typically while I was in the squad, the same people who I executed search warrants with all the time. And was Detective Taylor there? Yes, Detective Taylor was there. Judge, objection as to the same. I don't know who the same people are. He should identify who's present, who's not present. Well, Mr. Pupara, if you don't recall the names, would you ask him to repeat them? Sure. Could you repeat the names that you mentioned when you were describing the last search warrant, the people that were on your squad at this time? Objection. Sergeant Ivory was the supervisor. It was myself, Detective Pinto, Detective Pulliam, Detective Thomas, Detective Young, and Detective Taylor. Okay, so that was the squad, right? Yes. And did all of those people participate in this search? Yes. And what happened at the search? It was a search warrant, so we actually had to, ram in the door, use a bucket and ram, and clear the house. Once we got in there, a couple of people were detained, especially the female whose room we were in they were searching. She was, I think, the target's girlfriend or baby's mother. One or the other, I'm not sure. The house was photographed, and then it was searched. I was doing the inventory list. What's the inventory list? It's pretty much anything that's going to be seized to be submitted. You would actually have to write down where it was submitted from, who recovered it, the officer who recovered it, and where it was found. And I'm not asking you to remember specific items, but if you recall, what was found in this house? I don't remember the specific items, any items that were recovered from the house. Was money found? Money was found. And at some point, did you learn that the woman you mentioned had made a complaint that the money was missing after the search? Yes, sir. How did you learn that? Actually, it was the same day. Lieutenant, I think Devine was our lieutenant at the time, had called Sergeant Ivory and asked him about a female making a complaint about money was missing. But eventually, I think later on, we had got a complaint from IAD where we had to go down there and give a statement. What's IAD or IID? That's like internal affairs. They're the ones who investigate the police when you're supposed to have done something wrong. And did you get any money that was stolen from that search warrant? Yes, sir. How did you get it? After we finished doing the warrants, I was on the way home when Taylor gave me a call, asked me was I going to eat breakfast. I told him no, I was going home. So was this a real early morning search warrant if you were headed to breakfast? It was. We call it mass raids. We did numerous search warrants on that morning. Okay. So it was an early morning raid. All right. So you testified that you told Taylor no. You were going home? Yes. What happened next? He asked exactly where I was at, and I think it was either Gilmore or I was on Carey Street, and he told me to drive slow. He's going to catch up with me. Then he caught up with me. I think it's Franklin. He pulled beside me and got out and walked up to me and gave me a 5. But as he gave me a 5, he put money in my hand. How much money? It was probably no more than $200-300, if that. And where did you understand that money to have come from? It had to come from that search warrant. That was the only location we went to. Now, you've testified that your sergeant at the time of these 2 robberies was Sergeant Ivory, right? Yes, sir. At some point, did you join a unit led by Sergeant Wayne Jenkins? Yes, sir. What kind of unit was that? It was initially, it was an SES unit. But usually later on, we transferred over to Gun Trace Task Force.